Okay, we're recording. Hey, I'm David Brownstein. Welcome to the 2020 Music Industry Evolution Summit. My guest today is TIffany VanBoxtel. Thank you for being here, Tiffany.
Well, thanks so much. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. The subject today is singing. I'm going to read Tiffany's bio. Tiffany helps singer-songwriters, indie artists, and DIY singers and musicians give vocal performances and record tracks they are proud of with just 1 hour practice per week without overpriced voice lessons. Welcome to the summit, Tiffany.
Thank you.
So now, actually, before I talk about the businessy stuff, I want to understand, like, what were your original musical influences? Like, what started you singing, or just what like entered you into the world and forest of music?
Um, well, I remember there was a Christmas program coming up, and I volunteered to sing a solo, and I told my parents, and they were, okay,
Okay, you go, girl.
awesome. Kind of like, oh my gosh, what is this gonna be? And I sang my solo, and they said, well, maybe we should get you some voice lessons. And for me, I thought, like everyone kind of, it was it just kind of came out like that for everyone. Apparently it's not true, or some people don't feel that way, although it doesn't have to be that way. But yeah, that's how it started. I got some voice lessons, and
Well,
then I
what inspired you to want to sing in that Christmas event?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Probably like to show off. I don't know. I'm
To show
competitive.
off? That's possible. That's
I'm
possible.
competitive. I was probably only in like fourth or fifth grade, so it's hard to remember what was going through. I think we all had to do something. Like, I think it was a collaborative effort, and we all had to do something, and we got to choose what we wanted to do, and then our teacher kind of put us there accordingly.
Okay. Did you grow up with music in the house, or where did you hear music first?
I mean, I don't I don't even remember. I don't even
Yeah, cool.
remember. It was just one of those things where, like, I was starting to sing and I enjoyed it, and it was something that I was good at. And I think my love for it really started to come when I was sang in groups, which is interesting because I feel highly competitive. But there was something about singing in a choir that was really cool, and it really excited me. And that's kind of where it took off more. Like, I wanted to be, my original idea was I wanted to be a high school choir teacher. So that's what I went to college for, because I wanted to, be around choir. So it was really that group singing, and that um and in church too. When I was growing up, it was also really interesting. I was encouraged to sing solo and also in the adult choir, which was pretty cool, because I was only 10. And so
I'm sorry, you were
my
10, you were 10, you were singing in the adult choir?
I was 10 and I was singing the adult choir. But I think sometimes, like older teenagers get to do that kind of thing.
Yeah,
For that kind of thing. But I remember also my pastor played hymns in a really cool, like, piano bar style way.
wow.
And that's just how I remember music growing up. So a lot of it at that age was in the church and then in school, because that's kind of where you get those live experiences and then those group experiences at that age.
That's great. Yeah, there is something really unique about singing in a group and hearing singing and the vibration and what's coming from everywhere and everyone's singing and
Yeah, it's really magical when it like happens. You're like, oh. You're like, why am I crying? Why does this feel so good?
That's great. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I just saw the Laurel Canyon documentary, and they were talking about the mamas and the papas and the four voices in that, and just such a rich,
Yeah.
and the Eagles and stuff like that. So it's great. It's great. So this is great. So we are in this mode now in our pandemic lockdown where musicians are making music at home and the business is changing and the creativity is changing and singers are going online and doing live streams and songwriters are suddenly going, oh, I have to record my own vocal because I can't bring a singer in. And so I want to just talk about ways that you can recommend people to get better vocals done and prepare themselves. Maybe it's people who've taken a little bit of voice training, but not much. But people who sing a little bit. But what are some thoughts you have about how to respond to this moment in time as a singer, as a vocal coach, as a part of the musical ecosystem?
I think this is a really an opportunity to focus on you and what either sets you apart as a musician or what holds you back as a musician. And many times those can kind of play off of each other and really start to become a master of your craft. Like if there's, like let's say you are comfortable with your singing, but maybe you want to work a little bit more on your like guitar finger picking or something like that. I really think now is the time to develop those skills and dedicate, 10 to 15 minutes a day of just honing those skills so that when we do have a moment that those live performances may come back, or even as you are continuing to do your performances online or recording remotely, that you do have that comfort and ability to just kind of like express and emote what you want to without having to worry about your technical capabilities or like if it quote unquote sounds good.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And how? What are some ways to? That sounds easy. What how do you support people in that? Like I've also found when I am as a producer, if I'm working with artists and they know how to sing well and they know the song and they're hitting the notes and they're saying the lyrics and the time is good, but something's still missing. I'm like, how do you, as a vocal, coach specialist, how would you approach that, and how would you suggest producers and songwriters who are in that situations approach that?
So the first thing that we need to make sure of is that your like foundational technique stuff is good and that you're working on that about 10 to 15 minutes a day depending on what you want to improve. It's pretty much, it's very simple, but we as musicians, as creatives, it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole. So like if you want to sing higher, you start like looking on YouTube and you start like finding all these exercises and then you think, oh man, well I should probably work on my vocal break too, and then you kind of get sidetracked. So really focusing on one thing, finding exercises that work, maybe having someone to check in on with, an expert like once a month, just something very, very easy, something that that technically you are going to be progressing forward the way that you want to, so that when you do get into a studio, you can make those emotional choices. And when it comes, yeah.
Can you just say a little bit more about found what you mean by foundational and a little bit more? I mean, people are always talking about, well, you're singing this above the break and below the break. I kind of know what that means as a producer, but could you tell me more as if I was just a producer, not a singer?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is that I've had singers in my green room come in and tell me that after 9 voice teachers, they haven't learned the 3 foundational things that we work on in my membership, and it's just like blowing their minds. So a lot of this comes down to letting your voice out. So the big thing that I really want singers to start out with is allowing themselves to sing at like a level 8. And that's like volume, effort, energy, freedom. It's this opening up kind of thing. It's not just pure loudness, because if you're not singing at a consistent level, you're not going to be consistent ever, because your body is going to have to recalculate. If someone's singing a song and for the first time and you stop and you ask them, hey, like what level are you singing on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like meh and 10 being like I am feeling amazingly awesome and expressing myself to my fullest, they'll say 3 or 4. They will say
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And they wonder why they have pitch problems. They wonder why they can't control their voice. Well, it's because, I'm sure, as a producer, you got to set it up in a certain way for consistency. It's the same thing with the singer. They need to be consistent and giving consistent openness. So foundationally, that is a huge place to start. And that alone will solve 40 to 50% of issues. And then we can work a little bit more technically going from there.
So essentially, just crank it, not just volume, but intensity and passion and And volume.
and freedom and release, and just
Mm.
allowing yourself to release, because I think that the mind holds us back. Like, does this sound good? Am I singing in tune? Oh, that high note is coming up, so we tend to hold back. I mean, you can probably even see it on video, like as I'm like acting this out, our bodies will kind of close off a little bit, and that's going to constrict our freedom. That's going to constrict our voice. So very important.
Oh, that's great. That's great. No, that's great. It's funny. When I've sang, I'm always worrying about, am I singing it? How are my notes? How's my time? Also, because I'm the engineer and the producer and the songwriter at the same time. But I love the idea of like just practice it up to an 8. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, just allow yourself to let it go.
What are some other sort of foundational concepts that new singers or recording singers should be starting to think about?
Rhythm and airflow, hands down, hands down. Many singers don't think about rhythm in terms of, when do I breathe? We hear all of these stereotypes about like breathe with the diaphragm, which you don't do. But that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
But we never, a lot of people don't consider the timing of the breath. And you think about like the nature and how waves come in and they go out, and it's very, there's a flow to it and there's a time to it, and nothing holds the waves back, and that's why they come in. And if you're able to use that momentum with your breath and the momentum of the song, you're automatically going to be helping your voice release more. So that is huge. And then just rhythm throughout, even just thinking about where the downbeat falls, where the important words as a songwriter, where are these chord changes versus the important words that I want to express or bring out. And like, when we're doing that, what we really want is this freedom and this motion to kind of really let it go.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great. So it's sort of getting our body in sync with the music, and the vocal as an expression of that, and it kind of comes naturally out when you're more fully voiced or more fully breathing and more fully, yeah, inside of it in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah, and thinking about the rhythm, because we're not sustaining everything.
Hmm.
Not everything is long and held out, and singers tend to think much more pitch based versus rhythm based. And if you're not thinking rhythm based, it's going to be tough to follow you. It's going to be tough to add instruments to your voice. You're not going to be following the track, and just everything feels off, because you're worried about that pitch. But usually, if you can focus on the rhythm and you do have the training and the range, the pitch will come out. If you're singing level 8 and you're focusing on the rhythm, it'll come out the way that you want to, and it'll be very consistent.
Wow, wow, that's great. That's great. I've never really thought about it that way. That's beautiful. Let, so what that inspires me to ask you now is, how does a singer, or just, I want to talk about like finding a personal style or finding a unique style, because what you're talking about, rather than focusing on just the time, just the pitch, just the notes, there's a uniqueness in it. And I work with people on that in a lot of areas, but I don't usually work with them on their vocal style. And people seem to either come to my studio with that or they don't. But I just wonder how you would approach the whole style as a singer question.
So after you like let your voice out, you start to discover some nuances about it. If you're holding it back, those aren't going to be as apparent. So one thing that I really like to do is, once you're feeling like pretty comfortable with your voice, like let's say you're at like 70%, you're like, yeah, there's stuff I can improve on, but I'm feeling pretty confident performing in front of people, and I'm moving forward and I'm happy with that. And you can ask yourself, okay, how would I describe my voice in 3 adjectives? And a lot of people have a lot of trouble doing that. First of all, when they try to do that, they need a reminder about what one word means. They also need a reminder about what an adjective means. But I mean, that's not to say, that we need more training in like our English or our language, what that means is that people don't take the time to think about it in this abstract way, but with this set boundary as well to help them out with that.
Could you give me some examples of like a singer you work with or we know, just how you would give 3 adjectives? Because it's
Yeah.
a great concept.
Yeah. I mean, you can do like bright, shimmery, floaty, robust, earthy. I mean, I even use like chocolatey, like when you're swimming through chocolate, you know, it's got this roundness to it. Um, Soulful, sweet, sexy, you know, like breathy, like, because sometimes we do want that breathy sound depending on what you're going for and like what is natural. And then we do compare ourselves so often to artists. So one thing that may help with the comparison, or also help you to figure out how you're unique or what you could bring out with your training, is to compare that and ask yourself what you want it to sound like. What are 3 adjectives that I want to sound like? And then you're like, oh, well, robust and robust. Okay, cool. I'm cool there. Okay, awesome. Well, I want to sound a little more bright. You know, I have this depth and heaviness, but I want a little bit more brightness and projection. So maybe that can be something I can experiment with. So just kind of comparing yourself to those adjectives in a more abstract way kind of takes the pressure off you as a performer, and it kind of takes that mindset off of, oh my gosh, I have what it takes or I don't.
Wow, that's great. That's great. That's really great. I want to go try some of this stuff right now. But I'll wait till we're done.
It's kind of hard, you know. You're like thinking about it and you're like, how would I describe it? And then you might have to like sing it and then sing another song, and how would I describe that? And it really takes yourself out of your body and it puts you into like a scientist and an artist at the same time, you know, where you're not you anymore and you're not judging yourself.
That's great. Well, you know, we might have talked about this last time we spoke, but one of the reasons that I've wanted to develop my own voice is so that I'm in a songwriting session so I can get my ideas across. And I do songs that I'm, singing as an artist, but mostly it's to be more confident in a songwriting session with a really great singer, but I need to get my idea across and I can't just play it on my guitar. And I could, but it doesn't seem to help. So when I sing the idea, it comes across. But I love the idea that describing in a different way I want to level in a songwriting session, what are the notes, but tuning into a description of the impact that's really great also. It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
for sure. And it like allows you to focus yourself in a different way than worrying about the notes and the rhythms, because it I mean, most people have rehearsed enough and they know more than they think they do when it comes to memory. And
Mm-hmm.
so allowing yourself to get off the page and get in that performance mode, it also unlocks something in the brain too. Like when you stop looking at the lyrics or the chords, you find that there is a bit more freedom, and you may even hear subtle nuances and changes in the tempo that you play, or anything. I mean, it can be the strumming pattern, it can be just things start to change when you open up into performance mode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. So no, that's great. There's a lot to think about and try out. Let's segue a little bit towards so singers and performers are now live streaming at home. Sometimes, like as I was mentioning, I saw Ricky Lee Jones with one mic and all these great singers at home. What are some suggestions you have for singers who are live streaming to make their vocals sound better and that whole performance feel more impactful?
Yeah, totally. I'm not an audio tech. I stink at setting up sound. I'm just gonna go right there. Like if I'm doing something online, it's like literally just me and my iPhone. And that's how it is. And I'd like to challenge the idea that like online performance has to be different than a live performance. Like, does it really? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how much
Mm-hmm.
do people care about? I think a lot of people get stuck in their heads about like sound quality, but like to use that as a cover up for What excuse would you be giving if you were performing live? It's that kind of thing. So it really shouldn't be terribly different, and it doesn't have to be terribly technical when you set it up. I think the most important thing is like, you say you're going to do a performance, show up live and just do it, and just be honest and just be you, and allow yourself the freedom to do that.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think, also I was watching one of the other Laurel Canyon documentaries, and I saw Glenn Fry sing his version of Desperado, and it was Desperado. And then I saw Linda Ronstadt sing it, and it was, oh my God, Desperado. And there was such a different, emotional connection, because suddenly I was in the song, in the character, on the journey with her, as opposed to hearing the guy saying the same lyrics and the same melody. So talk a bit about how you work with singers on the emotional connection to a song they're singing.
So there's a couple different ways to do this. So I like to do a method that I call motion mapping. And what we're doing is we're just mapping out the song in sections, in different emotions. And there's layers of this technique that you can use. But in the broad scheme of things, in its simplest form, what you're doing is you're taking, like, let's say the first stanza of the song, and you're saying, okay, if I'm describing this stanza in one emotion word, what would that be? Um, and even words, and I like to try on two for sure. So like if I'm thinking that this emotion is sad, I'm also going to try a synonym that may connotate differently. So like sad and depressed are going to come out differently if you're singing a song. And then the idea is when you're singing that first verse, you're really thinking about being sad. And it's going to be constantly like in your mind, like you're going to be like sad, 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 because you're going to want to think, oh, that note, you're going to start to get distracted technically. But when you really get into it, it's a really good distraction. And you think about how that feels and then compare it to depressed. Try that. And maybe you'll get a color change in the voice. Maybe you'll get a tempo change in the song. You never know what you're going to get. And then you can just ask yourself, well, which one did I like better? Which one sounded better? Which one portrayed the song more in the way that I want it to be portrayed? And you kind of, sometimes you're going to be like, I like them both for different reasons. And it's about kind of marrying them and figuring out which one might work best. And this can also be used as a performance technique because you can keep your mind focused. You're sad, and then you get into the pre-chorus and you're yearning, and then you get into the chorus and then you're excited. You know what I mean? Like you've got those snap changes, and it's like bam, bam, bam. And the performance self doesn't have anything else to focus on except for those words. And that's a good thing because we want to provide that distraction so we can really get into it, and then it reads super clearly for our audience.
Wow, that's great. That's great. That's very similar to how acting coaches describe preparing an actor prepares for reading the script, understanding what every word means, what the turns are, what the character wants. That's great. That's great. So how do you tell me a bit about your approach? It sounds like you said are you working in groups with people? Is it one-on-one? How do you do this magical stuff that you're describing?
Well, some of this, the performance-based work is usually in a one-on-one setting, but like inside my membership, we do have master classes where, we feature one singer and everyone gets to observe. And, then we feature another singer and everyone gets to observe. So people can obviously try this out on your own, but it is more fun to get coached on it because it kind of takes you to different places, and you don't have to think so hard about what questions you're going to ask yourself. You can just answer the questions. And you might have like, oh, like one of those moments where you're like, oh, I never realized that, but that was there all along after I dug through the layers.
So do you have people, I'm just to get, I can't help but ask, do you have like a bunch of people on a call at one time with listening and someone saying in real time and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a master class. Wow.
Yeah, it's a master class as musicians know it. So it's kind of like a studio class. I mean, we also have other classes for like question and answer sessions, but
Yeah,
we do have
yeah.
these sessions which are much more performance based, and we do things like this, and we do delve into it. But we can only get here if you're comfortable foundationally, because you need to be in a space where you can let yourself go. But oftentimes I've worked with singers who don't feel super confident, but when they do get into this more creative and abstract space, they start to open up, and
Mhm.
and then they can translate it back into their technique work and say, oh, I know I was able to get a really cool sound when I was working this, so if I can do it once, I can do it again. So I just have to figure out how to reproduce it. And sometimes you can just think of the emotion word, like when you find a magical emotion word that really puts your voice into the place that you want. Our body knows how to be happy, our body knows how to be sad, and it can just call upon those emotions, and you'll get it, it'll be right there.
That's great. That's great. And also, I love what you're saying is in a way that partly because we're in virtual Zoom lockdown mode, people wouldn't necessarily think that kind of vocal work is something you could do in a group. But now we're learning to do things on Zoom that we never thought we'd have to do so much. So that's really great. That's really great. So before we talk about your free gift that you're offering to Summit people today, anything else you want to add that we didn't get, or do you wanted to point out, or that we missed today? And we covered a lot of great stuff.
No,
I'm thrilled.
oh, thank you. Well, I would just encourage you to give this a try. I mean, at the very bare bones, I would just go ahead and see if you can describe your voice in 3 adjectives, just to learn more about yourself. And then maybe to limit that comparison gap or any judgments that might be holding you back. Really examine, like, hey, what do I want in my voice? Because we really are born, like, you can improve your voice, but you are born with what you have. You know what I mean? Like, my voice is never going to be Christina Aguilera's voice. Like, we just have very different voices, and it's an apple to an orange, it's very, very different. So when you do this, you may discover, and you may give yourself some more grace and patience about, like, oh, well, I'm trying to be this person, but my voice, even in its optimal form, isn't even close to this. So I shouldn't even aspire to this. I should focus on what I can do within this, and see what's similar here, and maybe add some things to what I want, but also accept what I don't have, and then make great what you do have instead of comparing yourself.
That's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. I love this your approach. It sounds really exciting. Very cool.
Well, thank
Tell
you.
tell me what your I can't remember. I haven't have it written down here. What is your free gift that you're offering today for the folks at home?
So it's a class over the 4 steps to captivate your audience and give your dream performance. And it takes you through the dream performance process, which I've developed through working with singers. And then it also takes you through the 3 biggest mistakes that singers make when performing and preparing for a performance, and how to avoid them, because they're super easy to avoid. You just have to kind of be on the lookout for them.
That's great. That's great. That's great. That sounds great. Well, I'm so happy we could make the time to have you in today. I really wanted to include some more vocal people in, and it's music. The music's moving us, and you've really helped figure out to articulate how songwriters, singers can just get to the emotional core and develop a better sound and a better expression. So I'm really excited about what you said today. Can't wait to try some of those things out. I'm gonna try the three adjectives thing for myself today.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, and it's good. I'm glad we can just kind of talk about it, and then people can, like, have that on their plate to try and experiment with.
Well, because people always say, well, what does your voice sound like? And people go, well, I kind of sound like Adele meets this person meets that. So we tend to describe it in terms of the person we might sound like, not the quality, not the essence, not the emotional thing, not the adjective like chocolatey or airy or whatever it's going to
Yeah.
be.
And we can use this and cater this to our marketing, later when we're feeling really comfortable with it. But this is something that helps us get there, that helps you to feel more unique. Because, yeah, instead of saying Adele or Sam Beam or Whitney Houston or whatever, you're you.
Yeah.
You're you.
Imagine. Yeah.
Like, but like there's already Adele. Why would you want to be Adele? Like, I mean,
Right.
she's great. She's great. But like be you, bring something different. Bring something
Yeah.
different to our music scene here.
Well, I like the way if you look, yeah, if we describe it in adjectives and in descriptive language, then we get a sense of defining our essence, and also then we can kind of go, and I want to add a little bit of this and add a little bit of that and subtract a little of this
Yeah.
maybe and just modify it, and there becomes a little conscious intention around the voice development.
Yeah, well, I think about the word timbre, like the French word for color. Like, we're trying to play with different color palettes, and you can do it that way too. Like when you're singing, like, oh, this feels navy blue. I want to kind of add a little more robin's egg blue to it. What would that look like? And your body knows how to. It's so crazy because it like calculates all of these like these super precise things, like air pressure and frequency and lung tidal volume capacities, like all kinds of this stuff. And you can say something to your body like, oh, I want a little more robin's egg blue, and it'll deliver something different. It's amazing.
That's great. No, the words and the concepts the body has its own reaction, visceral reaction to it. Like good lyric, good singer, good sound shifts the body, and that's great. That's great. Well, great. This is great, Tiffany. So folks, for the summit, if you have questions, please post in the Facebook group. And if you have questions for Tiffany, maybe we can get her to come in and answer sometime. And I want to know what you learned, and maybe you can post your 3 adjectives how you would describe your voice or the qualities you want to add. So please post away, and yeah, let your voice grow and adapt and fine tune and shift. So thank you so much, Tiffany, for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Cool. I had a great time too. Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to press the stop button and see you guys on the next episode.